They are escaping, but to where? Welcome to Legends, a series that delves into the lore within Horizon Zero Dawn, a world with an abundance of powerful and moving history begging to be explored. Today, we will attempt to answer a question posed by the community concerning the behavior of Gaia's subordinate functions, specifically if we see any evidence of other subfunctions acting in a hostile or destructive manner as akin to Hades and Hephaestus. To get to the root of this topic, let's begin by examining what we know occurred during the events of the unknown transmission that set Horizon's story in motion. Once Gaia initiated her self-destruct sequence in order to save itself, Hades launched a virus, dissolving the code shackles that bound it to Gaia. In doing this, the code shackles that held the remainder of Gaia's subfunctions were also dissolved, leading to the subsequent escape of the others as well. This leads us to where the story is presently set. With no governing body, these subfunctions are now ostensibly autonomous entities. However, there is a pivotal piece of exposition from Elizabeth Sobek which provides a better sense of how these systems should operate within the framework of their design. In the data point titled The Good News, she states the following concerning the subfunctions. Think of them as extensions of Gaia's mind, each dedicated to a specific purpose. Now, these aren't AIs, but make no mistake, each presents an engineering challenge more profound than anything the human species has ever before attempted. Software that codifies the expertise of world-class minds into algorithms. Though incomprehensibly complex and advanced, they were not designed with the capability of true artificial intelligence. This is important to understand because even though subfunctions such as Hephaestus and Hades seem to exhibit a degree of free will and thought, they have simply prioritized their primary individual purpose, now that they are no longer intertwined to the system as a whole. Let's examine the evidence supporting this thought. Let's begin with Hades, Gaia's fail-safe extinction protocol. After the transmission that arrived at Gaia Prime, all subordinate functions became unregulated and self-aware. In this, Hades attempted to unseat Gaia and reverse terraforming operations. This is not a random action, but rather exactly what Hades was programmed to do, its sole purpose. This is all it knows how to do, and with Gaia no longer in control, it attempts to fulfill that purpose. Even once it breaks free from its code shackles and is robbed of the ability to tap into Gaia Prime's systems, it is still working to achieve its purpose, not out of spite or vengeance or any sort of malevolence, but once again, simply because its only function is to reset the biosphere back to zero, a clean slate from which terraforming can begin again. Hades only used the chariot line and Minerva's transmission arrays because after Gaia Prime was destroyed, this was the only means available to reset the biosphere. Now, in the scope of Zero Dawn, though this behavior makes sense to Hades individually, his role in design is an extreme outlier relative to the rest of the subfunctions. Hephaestus, on the other hand, the subfunction charged with machine creation, presents a more reactive shift than that of the former. To understand that shift, we have to go back even before the events of Gaia's demise. It would appear that the hunting of machines by humans is a practice that presumably dates back nearly all the way to those first released from cradle facilities in the year 2362. Most cultures we see in Horizon have some variant of trial or rite of passage that involves the hunting of machines, such as the proving to ascend to the rank of Enora Brave, brutal trials of admittance into Banuk Werix, and the fabled machine hunts of Karja Legend. All test man against machine. Not to mention that all the tribes heavily rely on the parts of the machines for all manner of weapons, armor, and mechanisms for survival. Even though the practice hasn't appeared to change over the centuries, the lack of a governing AI over Hephaestus has led to the creation of these more dangerous and hostile machines. This is because the subfunction, much like its counterpart discussed before, has prioritized its primary function over the needs of the terraforming system it no longer is connected to. Under the control of Gaia, the machines were described to be rather docile and skittish. Even when attacked with Gaia's affinity towards nature and humanity as a whole, these machines rarely became aggressive. In the quest A Moment's Peace, we see a piece of Gaia Prime that has fallen into the mountains over the Banuk camp. Its effect was to emit a signal to pacify the machines, a function once implemented by Gaia herself to protect the human population. With the AI gone, Hephaestus' sole purpose is to create machines which are being destroyed by the human populace. Without the framework of Gaia, Hephaestus sees humanity only as a threat to its creations and thus began to fabricate more combat-class robots to eliminate the machine hunters of various tribes. Which brings us back to our original question. Do we see any evidence of other subfunctions acting in a hostile manner? Which then lead us to ask ourselves two things. 1. Are there any other subfunctions who are solely designed to destroy rather than create, such as Hades? That answer would seem to be no. And 2. Are humans directly interacting and subsequently hindering the role of any other subordinate functions, as we have seen in the case of Hephaestus? We can firstly rule out Apollo. Obviously, as we well know, Apollo was purged by Ted Faro during the 21st century, well before the events of the unknown transmission. Until this can be undone, we have no real idea how a self-aware Apollo would function. We can also rule out Minerva, Eleuthia, and to a certain degree Artemis acting aggressively towards humanity. This because humans can't really inhibit a function that is ostensibly complete. With Minerva, it's predicted to have accomplished its goal of brute forcing the deactivation codes on the Pharaoh swarm sometime in the year 2116, 246 years before the first post-zero-day humans. With its task completed, it then appeared to remain dormant until Hades attempted to use the arrays for its own purposes. In this, with no ongoing role within the ZD framework, it would seem whether Gaia is present or not, Minerva's inactivity seems to have remained constant, thus non-aggressive. Much of the same can be said about Eleuthia as well. Not only was its primary directive also met, as well as it not being designed for perpetual use, its essential resources have been exhausted and its cradle facilities have been locked down. Frankly, it's highly unlikely it has had any significant contact with the outside world since the first generation of humans were released. Once again, no evidence of aggression. The situation concerning Artemis, though more unique than the former, has shown no real signs of hostility towards humans either. Though some might say this is because its goal of repopulating the globe with animal life was indeed completed, this is only partially true. Artemis did succeed in releasing Phase 1 organisms onto the re-terraformed planet, but this was not the intended end of its functionality. If Apollo had remained intact, these humans would have been educated in how to take control of the subfunction to reintroduce animals that required more stewardship than those that had come before. Only with the foundation of conservation, a stipulation engineered by the subfunction's alpha Charles Ronson, would the newest generation of humans be trusted with this process. Obviously, this never occurred and now may never occur. Since Artemis has now become self-aware, it seems to me one of two things will happen. 1, it will remain dormant, or 2, it will awaken and attempt to cultivate these remaining organisms itself. Though this may include apex predators of the past that may indeed cause the human population strife, I'm not sure one could count this as a true act of aggression against humans. And even if this was an action targeted at humans, much like Eleuthia, it can be presumed that the animal zygotes of Artemis are finite and could not perpetually produce these predators to specifically harm humans like Hephaestus. Regardless, in-game, we are yet to see these larger carnivorous species reintroduced into the wild. This leaves us with Aether, Poseidon, and Demeter. These three are particularly interesting because more than all the others, they are intertwined with the machines of Hephaestus. In order for Poseidon to cleanse the planet's many bodies of water and Aether to purify the Earth's atmosphere, Gaia had to design machines to carry out these roles, this obviously through the knowledge and fabrication capabilities of Hephaestus. Now, one may point to the machines' increasing aggressions toward humans as evidence of Hephaestus having influence over the machines, and this may indeed be the case, but there is one piece of evidence that bears mentioning before we deem this as a definitive conclusion. Before the fall of Gaia Prime, she informed us of the ramifications her actions will have on Zero Dawn as a whole. Within Gaia's dying plea, she states the following. With no central governing intelligence to regulate the terraforming system, it will continue operations for some time, but in an increasingly chaotic manner, and eventually it will break down. Though machines designed by Hephaestus post-transmission are truly only built for combat, we still see evidence of terraforming machines being built and working to keep the system going, though as previously stated, in an increasingly chaotic manner. Snapmaws can be seen still working to purify waterways, caravans of behemoths and shellwalkers are still taking resources back to cauldrons, and lancehorns are still driving chill water into the soil. All roles that serve the once connected terraforming process and still fall in line with their specific subfunctions, only now as time passes they continue to become more aggressive. So, where does this leave us? Though Hephaestus is developing and manufacturing hunter-killers, it would appear that either the subfunctions have still retained some degree of governance over their respective machines, or, once built, their independent programming is no longer directly connected to their respective subfunctions. Yet, one unique outlier is yet to be discussed, and that is Demeter. The subfunction responsible with repopulating the planet's flora, Demeter is really the only subfunction we see tangible evidence of new activity post-transmission outside of Hephaestus and Hades. Activity that may lend credence to the notion of Aether and Poseidon having more control over their machines than we may have thought. After conversing with Cyan, we gained insight into the potential origins of the metal flowers. Only appearing after the transmission, these are believed to promote further seed germination, accounting for the unique flower patterns that surround them. Whether these were cryogenically preserved seed stocks that hadn't been used until after Demeter became self-aware, or the subfunction has found a way to harvest the existing plant life to further planting, is unknown. Also, the poems found within their code not only reflects the literary taste of Demeter's alpha Naoto, but also may point towards their use in testing and programming the emotional responses of Gaia during her development. The appearance of these flowers seems to indicate several things. 1. Demeter is active and is continuing its dedicated purpose. 2. These flowers had to be constructed, presumably from cauldron facilities or machines built within cauldron facilities, meaning either Hephaestus is working in tandem with other subfunctions or is still impacted and influenced by the terraforming goals of ZD, maybe even both. Up to this point, though, Demeter does not seem to be overly concerned by the activity of humans on the planet. But, being that its function is an ongoing one, if human activity begins to negatively impact the environment, much like we see today, perhaps things could take a turn for the worse. In conclusion, do we see subfunctions outside of Hades and Hephaestus deliberately seeking to harm humanity? From what I can deduce, presently, no. However, if subfunctions designed to operate perpetually begin to be impacted negatively from human interaction, then this could certainly change. For now, we can only examine the information currently available to us, and until more is revealed, we must all wait to see what we can learn from where Aloy will take us next. And that brings our journey to an end. If you'd like to see more content like this, likes and shares are always appreciated, and if you really like what we're doing at the channel, come join our community and hit that subscribe button. Also consider supporting the channel on Patreon to help us create new series and to supply more quality content just like this. Check out the link in the description. The topic for today's video came from one of you, our awesome subscribers, so if you have a great idea or an interesting question that could lead to our next episode, let us know in the comments down below, and until next time, thanks for watching and keep questing.